The signal from the void, the stars in Sector 17 Beta, had been quiet for centuries. Nothing moved there, nothing lived, nothing dared to go near. Long ago, it was the center of a massive war. Now, it was just frozen space, full of broken metal. And silence, but something changed. A faint signal began to echo from deep within the void. It was weak, old, full of static. Most scanners ignored it. But one alien scout ship caught it by accident. Captain Threx of the Varnali Explorer didn't understand the message. It was in an ancient human frequency, one that had not been used in over 800 years. His crew ran it through translation systems. After many failed attempts, one message became clear. Supercarrier-class vessel, Hellspear. Status, classified, do not approach. Captain Threx froze. Everyone had heard stories of the human supercarriers, but no one believed they still existed. He sent the signal to the Galactic Coalition. Within hours, the Council gathered in the High Spire. Leaders of 20 species debated what to do. Some said it was just a broken satellite. Others said it could be a trap. But the Arcanian Empress spoke with fear in her voice. If Hellspear is real, we must see it with our own eyes. She ordered a stealth cruiser to be sent. No weapons. Just sensors and speed. They called it the Silver Gaze. The Silver Gaze jumped into the void with silent engines. It drifted slowly toward the source of the signal. Black space wrapped around it, cold and endless. The crew felt the weight of history pressing down on them. Soon, they reached the exact coordinates. At first, they saw nothing but debris and frozen asteroids. Then, the sensors blinked, a distortion, like the stars were bending, and then the captain gasped. A massive object was rising from the shadows. It wasn't a mountain, it wasn't a moon. It was metal, ancient and scarred, covered in frost and forgotten weapons. The Silver Gaze's lights scanned it slowly. Gigantic cannons hung like sleeping dragons along its sides. Its hull was black with human markings. One word stretched across the middle in faded letters: Hellspear. As the crew watched in silence, something moved. Lights flickered along the side of the ship. Panels opened by themselves, and then, without warning, the signal changed every screen. On the Silver Gaze flashed red. A voice came through, low and broken. System reboot in progress. Human command not detected. Enemy presence unknown. The crew panicked. Weapons were not allowed on the Silver Gaze. They had no way to fight. They could only watch as the ancient machine began to wake. Then, another message echoed through. Deep space, this time louder, stronger. A message that every old species remembered from the war. Humanity never yields. The message spread like fire. It reached the edges of the coalition. It entered the systems of old war veterans. It made the blood of even the bravest warriors run cold. On distant worlds, alien scholars pulled out forbidden books. In them were sketches of the human warships. Ships so powerful they turned planets into dust. Ships so feared that an entire alliance was formed just to stop them. And now, one of them had returned. And it was waking up, back in the council chambers. Silence filled the air. The Empress stood slowly and whispered, "We must kneel, or we will burn." The monster beneath the ice, the frozen planetoid known as Zurich 9, had no sun. It spun slowly in a dead orbit, buried in shadows and silence. Ice stretched for miles across its surface, hiding secrets too old to remember. And now, beneath that thick layer of ice, something ancient was waking up. Hellspear, the Forgotten. Supercarrier was no longer silent. Its systems were old, broken, full of dust and corrosion. But deep inside its heart, the human war ray had begun to restore itself. Old wires sparked, frozen engines hummed. Nanobots stored in cryopods crawled out and started repairs. On the Coalition's nearby research vessel, panic was rising. The Silver Gaze had sent the emergency signal, Hellspear waking, then it went quiet. Admiral Tavar of the Coalition fleet watched the feed in horror. The frozen planetoid was now glowing beneath the surface. Something massive was moving under the ice, and slowly, very slowly, the top layer began to crack. Coalition scientists confirmed it. Hellspear had not just crashed, there it had buried itself on purpose, like a sleeping beast hiding in the cold. Now, it was no longer asleep. The Council sent more ships, this time armed. Dreadnoughts, interceptors. Cruisers all formed a blockade around Zurich 9. No one wanted to fire first. but everyone was ready to pull the trigger. Inside Hellspear, the AI reconnected to the ship's systems. Old blueprints of human battles scrolled across the screens. Defensive towers rose from the hull, and then, in the main cryochamber, a pod released a hiss of gas. The door opened slowly. Inside was a man, Captain Rourke. The last known commander of Hellspear lay inside, frozen in time. Still in his black human war uniform, his eyes opened slowly, confused and cold. "Status," he whispered. The AI replied in a voice like thunder, "Welcome back, Captain Rourke." "The war is not over." He looked around, trying to stand. He limped to the main command deck, still surrounded by ice. He placed his hand on the console, and the ship responded. The lights turned on, the engines stirred. The cannons woke outside. Coalition ships watched in fear. Their sensors picked up massive power spikes. Admiral Tavar ordered them to hold fire, but inside, soldiers whispered, "What if it attacks? What if the old stories are true?" The AI sent out a new signal, encrypted, human only, but someone heard it, hidden across the galaxy. Old human colonies that had gone silent stirred again. The children of Earth, the lost sons and daughters. Received the call. On a mining world deep in Sector 14, a half-human girl looked up from her screen. "Hellspear," she whispered, eyes wide. Her grandfather, once a soldier in the last human fleet, stood up trembling. "They're back," he said, tears in his eyes. "They're finally back." The coalition began to panic. Ships retreated. But some stayed, trying to jam the signal. But Hellspear ignored them. It focused on repairs. On recharging its power. It wasn't ready for war, not yet. Rourke stood on the bridge, looking out at the alien ships. He remembered what they did. The betrayal, the lies, the war that ended with fire. He clenched his fist. "Not this time," he said quietly. "This time, we choose when to speak." As the final layer of ice cracked and shattered, Hellspear rose fully into space. Its black metal armor gleamed. Under the distant stars, it was larger than anything the aliens had seen in 1,000 years. And it was still only at 40% power. A coalition scout sent one last warning. "If you do not respond, we will attack," Rourke replied with silence. Then, slowly, he sent a message. Council in Chaos, the Galactic Council, had not gathered in full assembly for almost 500 years. Now, every seat was filled, and the chamber was buzzing with fear. On the grand holoscreen above them, the image of Hellspear floated in silence. Massive, dark, alive, and terrifying. Ambassadors from 50 alien species sat in silence, their faces pale. The image of the human supercarrier had stunned them all. Some had thought humans were extinct. Others believed they had hidden away in shame, but no one expected this. The voice of the Arcanian Empress echoed in the chamber. "We told you," she said coldly. "We buried the wrong species." The room erupted into shouting. Claws slammed on desks. Tentacles waved. Translators beeped in panic. Admiral Vroll, leader of the Breaktesh Armada, stood up. "This is a threat to the entire galaxy," he growled. "We must destroy that ship before it awakens further." But High Scholar Tamara of the Lithari shook her scaled head. "We tried that once," she said softly, "and lost half the galaxy doing it." The room fell quiet. Old memories hung in the air like smoke. The human wars were ancient history. To most, but some in the room had lived through it. They remembered the burning moons, the screaming fleets, the way humans fought like they had nothing to lose. Counselor Athun, a pale long-necked thinker from the Vari species, spoke next. "I thought they died in their pride," he whispered. "But now I believe." They waited suddenly. The chamber lights flickered. A transmission was coming, in unsecured and unfiltered. The council guards scrambled to block it, but the signal pushed through with raw power. The screen turned black, then slowly lit up. "Captain." Rourke appeared. His face was calm, his uniform old and marked with scars. He looked straight into the camera, speaking not with anger, but with cold clarity. "I am Captain Rourke, commander of Hellspear, last servant of the Earth War Command." He paused, then said, "Humanity has watched the stars in silence." But not in sleep. Every word echoed in the hall. He continued, "We remember the betrayal, the ambush, the silence after the fire. We remember your counsel, and how it cheered our fall, Councillor Grell of the Avroxian Republic jumped up. "We never wanted war," he shouted. "We wanted peace." But Rourke kept speaking. "You wanted control, not peace." Then he smiled slightly. "But don't worry, we are not here for revenge." The chamber was silent again. "But we will never bow," Rourke said, voice hard now, "and you will never forget." The screen went dark. The room remained frozen, as if time itself stopped. Finally, the Empress stood again, her voice shaking. "We are not prepared for this," she admitted. "Not politically, not militarily, not emotionally." Whispers moved like wind through the council hall. Some called for negotiation, some for surrender, others for war, but no one knew what would come next. Admiral Vrowell spoke again, louder this time. "This is why we must act now," he barked. "While the ship is still waking up, we must strike, and if we fail—" Asked Tamara, "Do you want to wake the sleeping army's humans left behind?" The room went cold. The idea that Hellspear was just the first shook even the bravest leaders. Then a message arrived, private but intercepted by several council members. A fleet of ghost signals had appeared near 3 old human war zones. Unknown vessels, silent and moving. It wasn't just Hellspear. The network was activating. Fear became panic. A few counselors left the chamber, claiming sickness or emergency. Others argued for unity. But in truth, the cracks had already begun to form. Races that had once ruled the skies now felt something deeper than fear. They felt shame for what they had done, for who they had silenced. And now the silence was over. On the outer edge of the council hall, a young alien reporter whispered into her recorder, "This is not a story about war," she said. "It is the return of something greater. The return of belief, and far beyond the stars, aboard the Hellspear." Captain Rourke stood in the command center. He looked at old photos of Earth, of his lost family. He touched a faded badge on his chest. "They buried our name," he said. "But they couldn't bury our spirit." The AI responded quietly. "Command accepted, Captain." Awaiting next move. And the galaxy waited too, holding its breath. The awakening deep in the frozen orbit of Zerek-9. The ancient human warship Hellspear hovered in silence. The stars around it seemed smaller now, as if they feared to shine. Too close, the ship was waking, not just piece by piece, but as a whole. Systems once thought dead were humming again. Inside the command deck, Captain Rourke stood alone. He had walked through the corridors of the Supercarrier, finding only dust, silence, and bones. Most of the old crew had perished in cryosleep, or were lost during the crash. Only he remained frozen longer than planned. Forgotten but preserved, the AI had done its job. It kept the ship alive, kept Rourke alive, and waited for the right moment. Now that moment had come. "Status report," Rourke said, his voice echoing through the metal chamber. The AI answered instantly. "Primary engines online. Secondary weapons operational. Internal repairs at 61%. Cryocrudices. External threat surrounding fleet of 17 coalition ships." Passive mode. Rourke stared at the large hologram showing enemy positions. The coalition had sent its strongest ships, but none dared attack yet. He understood why they feared the old stories might be true. They feared Hellspear might still be strong. They were right in the hangar bays. Small drone fighters rebooted. They clicked and blinked, cleaning off frost and charging weapons. In the medbay, automated arms restocked medical supplies. In the armor forge, machines began melting down old broken plates and crafting new ones. This ship, this monster, was not just a warship. It was a moving city, a factory, a fortress. It was a symbol, and it was almost ready. Rourke opened the ancient command logs. Reading the last orders left before the fall: hold the line, defend Earth's edge, do not fall back. He remembered the battle, the betrayal, the ambush by the very council now watching him from afar. "Humanity was left to die," he whispered. "But we didn't." He turned toward the AI screen. "Broadcast a signal," he said. "To who, Captain?" The AI asked. "To the galaxy." Rourke answered. "It's time they remember." The message was short. Not a threat, not a demand, just a truth. Hellspear lives. It spread like lightning, bouncing from system to system. Every old human outpost, every forgotten colony, every secret research station, all of them heard it. On the planet Carthus V, An old woman stared at her radio and wept. Her son had served on Hellspear. She thought he died centuries ago. Now she placed her hand on the glass and whispered, "They came back on an outlaw mining station." A group of hybrid humans and aliens stood in silence. They had hidden their human blood for generations. Now one of them smiled. "We don't have to hide anymore," he said. "They're rising in a remote desert." A rusted beacon blinked for the first time in 700 years. Its signal joined the others, part of a forgotten web that once spanned the stars. Now it was waking too, back. On Zurich 9, Rourke stood at the front of the command deck. The holographic map showed flashes of human tech reactivating across the galaxy. "It's not just us," he said softly. "We were never truly alone." Suddenly, the ship's proximity alarm rang out. One of the coalition ships had moved closer to close, weapons charged. A warning was issued, but Rourke raised his hand. "No fire," he said. "Let them look. Let them see." He opened the bay doors, exposing Hellspear's core design. Thousands of turrets, missile banks, and gravity projectors unfolded like wings, but they didn't fire. They just existed. Huge, silent, terrifying. The message was clear. We don't attack first. But the power was real. If provoked, Hellspear would become death itself. Admiral Tavar, watching from his ship, trembled. He realized something no council member wanted to say out loud. They were not dealing with a relic. They were facing a living god machine. And worse, it had a human heart, a heart that remembered pain, betrayal, and silence, but also a heart that still beat for justice. Captain Rourke watched the stars. He didn't smile. He didn't rage. He just stood with purpose. "We're not here to conquer," he said. "We're here to balance." The AI's voice came once more. "Hellspear is fully online, awaiting orders." Fire and memory. The stars around Zurich 9 glowed faintly, as if watching something they hadn't seen in ages. The human supercarrier Hellspear now hovered freely in space, fully awakened. Its weapons were silent, but visible giant turrets, missile bays, and energy cannons. And in every alien fleet nearby, the silence felt heavier than war. Admiral Tavar stood aboard the lead coalition dreadnought, his fists clenched behind his back. He had served for decades, fought dozens of battles, and faced terrible enemies. But this was something else. Hellspear didn't just look powerful, it remembered. "Send one last message," he ordered. "Warn the ship. If it doesn't respond, we engage." Hescom's officer hesitated. "Sir, what if it responds?" "With fire." Tavar didn't answer. He stared at the massive ship and whispered. Then we all burned together. A sharp transmission shot across to Hellspear. "This is Admiral Tavar of the Galactic Coalition Fleet. You are surrounded. Stand down, or we will fire." Captain Rourke stood at his command console. He didn't blink, didn't move, just listened. Then he spoke calmly. "This is Captain Rourke, of Earth War Command." There was a pause. "We don't yield," he said, "and we don't fear death." Rourke turned toward the AI core. "Activate Defense Protocol Sigma." The AI responded. "Confirmed. Weapons online. Threat containment engaged." Suddenly, Hellspear moved, not forward, not backward, but with precise purpose. Its cannons rotated in perfect sync. Its shields flickered like a silver storm. Drones launched silently from its underbelly, floating like steel wasps into position. Admiral Tavar panicked. "Shields up," he barked. "Prepare to!" Before he finished, Hellspear struck, but it didn't kill, in 3 swift bursts of light. Hellspear disabled 3 of the Coalition's top dreadnoughts. Not destroyed, disabled. Engines fried, weapons melted, crews unharmed. It was a warning, not an attack. On board the Council's comms channel, every voice fell silent. They had expected rage, revenge, destruction. But instead, Hellspear had shown restraint. Inside the human ship, Rourke sat down slowly. He looked at an old photo he kept in a cracked frame. His crew, smiling, long dead. "Every shot I fire for them," he whispered. He activated the main broadcast. This time, not just to the coalition ships, but to the entire galactic network. Billions across the stars would hear him. He spoke slowly. "You feared us, so you betrayed us. You erased us from your records, but we remember, on distant planets." Screens lit up. Alien children watched. Their parents stood frozen. Rourke's voice was soft but strong. "We do not come to destroy, but we do not come to beg." He paused, then added, "Let me tell you what fire taught us." He looked around the dark command room. "When the sky burned over Earth, we learned pain. When our ships fell silent, we learned loss. But when we stood alone, we learned who we are." Hellspear's external lights brightened, illuminating ancient human markings across its hull. A forgotten symbol, two hands, one of metal, one of flesh held together under the old Earth flag, and beneath it, the words, "Honor before survival." In the Coalition fleet, no one dared speak. The commanders of 50 worlds saw the truth. This was not just a machine. This was memory, purpose, and legacy in one body. Back on a dusty moon far from the scene, an old human survivor watched with tears in her eyes. She whispered to her granddaughter, "That man, he was just a soldier, but now he speaks for all of us." Admiral Tavar looked at the image one last time, then lowered his weapon systems. He opened a private channel. "Captain Rourke, what do you want?" There was a long silence. Then Rourke replied, "I want the truth," he said. "No more lies, no more hidden stories." He leaned forward. "I want the galaxy to know we never disappeared. We were buried, but we rose." Tavar exhaled. "Then what happens now?" Rourke didn't answer right away. He looked at the stars. At dawn, he said, "We speak again." And so, the ships remained in space. No more fire, but the memory of it hung in every soul. Because Hellspear had spoken, and the galaxy had listened. Kneel or burn at the edge of the galaxy. Where stars flickered like dying embers, the Supercarrier Hellspear floated in silence. The Coalition fleet remained in orbit around it, weapons now cold but fingers still tense on triggers. No one dared move, no one dared speak first. Everyone was waiting for a choice. For a message, for the storm or the peace, and then she arrived, a golden flagship cut through space. Shimmering like a star that had been shaped into a blade. It was the personal vessel of the Arcanian Empress, ruler of 5 systems, and the voice of the High Council. Her arrival changed everything inside Hellspear. Captain Rourke watched the golden ship approach. The AI scanned it instantly. Royal-class diplomatic vessel, no weapon locks detected. Shields active. Rourke nodded once. "She came to talk," he said, "or to surrender." A soft tone echoed across the bridge. "Incoming communication request from the Arcanian Empress." Rourke didn't hesitate. Put it through. Her image appeared in front of Himtal. She wore armor instead of robes, a sign of respect among her people. She looked at Rourke for several seconds before speaking. "You shouldn't exist," she said, her voice low and steady. And yet, Rourke replied, "Here I am." Silence passed between them, a silence full of pain, memory, and history. Then she spoke again. "I have read the archives, the ones our council tried to erase. I know what we did." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Then you know why I don't kneel." The Empress bowed her head slightly. "I do," she said, "but the question is, will we kneel?" In that moment, across every ship and screen connected to the Council's network, her message was broadcast live. A bold move, a public choice. She stepped back from the camera, removed her crown, and placed it at her feet. Then, in front of her, guards, in front of her commanders, in front of her people, she knelt. Gasps filled the ships. Commanders stared at their monitors, unsure if this was surrender or wisdom, but they knew what it meant when the Empress knelt. The protocol was clear. Every ship under her rule must follow. And so they did, one by one, across the stars. The Coalition fleet dimmed their weapons. Cannons powered down, shields dropped, engines slowed. On every ship, commanders gave the same order. Signal, Hellspear. We kneel inside Hellspear. The AI reported it calmly. 17 ships have powered down. All signals show submission. Captain Rourke didn't smile. He simply stood taller, not in pride, but in burden, the burden of those who survived. When they were meant to be erased, he opened a channel to the Empress once more. "We didn't come to rule," he said. "We came to return." She looked up at him from her kneeling position. "Then let us return together," she said. "But—" Rourke didn't respond right away. He turned and walked through the corridor of Hellspear. The walls still bore the marks of battle, of sacrifice, of death. He passed cryo-chambers filled with silence, names etched on glass, names of people who never woke up. He stopped at one. chamber, a woman's photo taped to the inside, his wife, his co-captain, lost in the final battle. He touched the glass gently. "This piece is for you," he whispered. Then he returned to the command deck. He looked at the stars, then at the fleet outside. He spoke to the AI. "Send a message to the galaxy." "What message, Captain?" "Tell them the war is over. Tell them Hellspear does not burn. Tell them we forgive." The AI paused, then responded. Message sent, and so it was done the next day. News spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Empress had knelt. The Coalition had lowered its weapons, and Hellspear had accepted peace. Some cheered, some wept, some still feared, but no one could deny what had happened. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, not as ghosts, but as a power that could not be erased. In quiet corners of distant worlds, children now studied human history again, not as monsters, but as survivors. And in the deepest parts of space, old human outposts blinked to life, one by one, answering Hellspear's call. Captain Rourke stood once more at the helm, not with a sword in hand, but with history in his heart. Humanity returns to the galaxy had changed overnight. Where once there was silence, now there was movement. Old frequencies whispered again, ancient codes flickered alive, and names long erased were being spoken once more. In every corner of known space, the message was clear. Humanity was back. On a trade world called Trelax 3, a crowd gathered around a public screen. Aliens of all shapes watched the same replay, Captain Rourke standing tall inside Hellspear, his voice calm, but his words powerful. "We do not come to conquer, but we will not kneel again." A young alien boy tugged at his father's sleeve. Were humans always this strong? The father, once a soldier during the human war, nodded slowly. "They were more than strong," he said. "They were fire inside flesh, across the stars." The impact was felt deeply. The Coalition, shaken but intact now, held emergency meetings. Many called for peace talks. Others, still afraid, demanded human technology be contained. But none dared raise a weapon again, not after Hellspear. In the ruins of an old colony on the edge of a forgotten asteroid belt, a long-lost beacon lit up. The structure had been dead for 700 years, buried under dust and metal, but now lights glowed, and a voice whispered from the shadows, "Earth, are you still out there?" Inside Hellspear, Captain Rourke walked the long steel halls alone. He passed memorial chambers, names carved into walls, flowers left in frozen airlocks. He paused before a giant wall marked Alpha Crew. Each name had a story. Each story had a cost. Rourke placed his hand on the wall. "You didn't die for nothing," he said. "We're home again," Rourke asked. "Yes, sir," the AI replied. "Over 50 active colonies have responded. Some are minor outposts, others full cities." Rourke stood still. He had expected ruins, silence, emptiness. But humanity had endured, scattered, hidden, afraid, but alive. "Open a channel to all of them," he said. The AI obeyed. In 100 different corners of space, humans stared at their screens. Miners, scavengers, doctors, farmers, children who had never seen Earth, and then they heard the voice. "This is Captain Rourke of Hellspear," he said. "If you hear this, know that you are not alone. We have returned. The time of hiding is over." Hope bloomed across galaxies. Old flags were raised again. Communities that had been quiet for centuries now sang the Earth anthem. Even some aliens joined them, those who had lived beside humans in secret. Those who had waited too, back on Xeric 9, the Coalition began sending messages. Proposals for peace, offers to cooperate, requests for access to human history. Rourke accepted the peaceful ones, rejected the lies. He wasn't there to rebuild the old council, he was there to build something new. Soon, a gathering was planned. Not a war meeting, but a summit, for the first time in galactic history. Humans would stand among the stars, not as a threat, but as a voice. Hellspear would serve as the meeting ground, the place where silence was broken and truth returned before the summit. Rourke made a choice. He traveled to an old human moon, Coloniaris Prime, the first Earth colony ever built, long believed abandoned. What he found stunned him. Children laughed in dusty halls. Farms grew in recycled light. Families lived with honor. Never knowing Earth's fate, when they saw Rourke, they gasped. "Are you from the ship in the sky?" a girl asked. He smiled gently. Yes, from a time before yours, the people gathered in silence. Rourke looked at them, his people, not soldiers, not rebels, just survivors. We lost Earth. But we never lost ourselves, he told them. And now, we rise. When he returned to Hellspear, the AI greeted him. Captain, the summit is ready. Then, let's begin, he said. Leaders from over 30 species arrived. They came not with demands, but with questions. They came not with threats, but with ears ready to listen. Hellspear welcomed them all. Rourke stood at the center of the ship, surrounded by those who once feared his kind. He did not speak with anger. He spoke with truth. We were hunted, betrayed, erased. But we learned not just how to remember. He raised his hand and said, "We offer no crown, no empire, only this."